Well, hello and welcome to the show. Kelly, it's nice to see you today.
You too. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, this is an exciting topic. And obviously, if you are here and you hit play on your device, you are interested in what we have experienced and what we continue to kind of go through in our own hormonal stages. And we're here and we're going to be very open and honest about that because we know women want to hear and they want to be able to relate. And and I think number one is they want clear direction. And we're also going to use today as an exciting announcement. And if you haven't already heard, I'm in the process of writing a book. And like I was telling Kelly before I had record, I haven't decided on a title yet, and it doesn't really matter, but we will nail a title down soon. But it's going to be a woman's survival guide from monthly cycles to menopause. And I am happy to announce that Kelly is going to be a contributor to the book, which there's nothing better than that.
Thank you. I'm excited to help.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the things, and this as a coach and people and a dietitian that works with people, when somebody with diabetes meets somebody with diabetes, we truly get it because we've either experienced it, and even if we haven't experienced it, we understand it. We know it, we feel it. And that's what's going to be exciting about this book. So along with myself and Kelly as a contributor, we have Dr. Vanessa Severo. She is a OBGYN that practices in the state of New York, and she is a hormone expert. And this is the kicker. She also lives with type 1 diabetes. So I am beyond blessed to have both you and Vanessa in my life, to be able to create a piece of material, a book
Yeah.
that women of all ages living with diabetes, insulin-dependent diabetes, can refer to and rely on. And yeah, I'm just so excited to be able to do that. Yeah.
That'll be great.
Yeah, yeah, it's good stuff. So today let's talk about our journeys. So, and just to be honest, and I'm sure a lot of you know my age. I'm 58. I am postmenopause now, meaning my cycle stopped, gosh, years ago. I've lost track of really what year that was. It's been so long. And Kelly, you're a little younger, which I think is great because I love this dynamic of, the span of our ages are obviously different. We both live a disease, and just like all women, we all have a different experience through this time of life managing that side note of diabetes. So we're going to just kind of unpack really our journey. So let's start, and I'm going to turn the mic over to you just to kind of explain a little bit about how is it going so far for you at your age? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad to happy to share.
That's a wide open question. I don't know. How's it going so far? It's like,
What do you want to
oh,
share, Kelly?
I know.
I think as a practitioner and even someone living with type 1 diabetes, I've always been really transparent. And I've been transparent because I think with type 1, we need to advocate our needs. And conversations like this can help more than just ourselves. And, I'm really excited to hear your journey, Melissa. I don't even know the full details.
Oh,
And when we approached a topic to talk about and record, this is one I genuinely want to have just for myself, and of course to share with others. So we're in slightly different seasons. I'm 41 as this is being recorded.
mhm.
And I guess related, unrelated to type 1 diabetes, I have a sister that's 11 months older. We're Irish twins. And she started having hormonal symptoms first, but it empowered me to jump on the horse, collect the data, understand the differences with type 1, and be very proactive with my care. So since age 39, I've
Mm,
been using hormone replacement therapy.
mm.
And I will jump in and how that started, what
Sure,
started,
sure,
and so
yeah.
forth, and where I'm at today.
Mhm.
But it's really interesting as my sister was explaining, I just feel wiped out. I have all these symptoms. I have brain fog. I'm gaining weight in certain spots. I have cravings. I'm not doing anything different with my diet. The body's so different. I was like, aha, yeah, yeah, yeah. So then I started researching, and with type 1 diabetes, we're at risk to have perimenopause, which can be age 35. Menopause average age is 51. We can be a little at risk to have those earlier, have symptoms earlier. And what does that come down to? Of course, being an autoimmune disease, there's more inflammation. So inflammation can drive some different things. These symptoms and occurrence of menopause, perimenopause can come sooner. So that's not always broadcasted, but I think it's worthy of knowing. And now at age 41, even going back to the kickstart, I guess you could say, of my journey at 39, I would say my biggest complaint was blood sugar control.
Mm.
It suddenly became harder. Was that something you recall as well? What was your number one?
It was, but and I'll start at the beginning of mine after you can kind of expand on yours a little bit. I did not really fully understood that part of the hormones until later. So
Got it.
I think I was closer to really menopause or really reaching that full year without a cycle before the insulin resistance kind of started to up. And I'll share after. Again, my story is pretty crazy. It really is.
Yeah.
Mm, I had a lot of stuff going on, and I didn't even know while I was in it that it was hormone related.
Yeah.
Again, we're talking 15 years ago. So,
Yeah.
yeah, 10, yeah, I'll say 15 years ago. So, when I was about your age. So, yeah, yeah. So you go on and continue because I
Yeah.
want to hear what's going on now with you.
Yeah, and please do interject and
Yeah,
ask
yeah.
questions because if you're wondering something, I'm sure our listeners are too. So my journey going back age 39, in my practice, I've been in practice for almost 13 years,
Mm,
and I only test things on my clients that I've tested on myself. Thanks to my sister, this conversation, this kind of window was open to explore. And I was like, I want to do some testing on myself to understand these true symptoms. So I have a report in front of me. It's called a Dutch Plus, and this is what propelled my advocating and getting hormones. And this is a test that tests a number of things. People may have heard a Dutch test. People may have heard of a Dutch Plus test. The
mhm,
plus just tests for a few extra things, which I think are essential. So when we have what we think is hormone imbalance, it can very much relate to low thyroid. So it's important we are consistently testing our thyroid in this age
mm.
35 to 40 to 45 to 50 and on to make sure that the thyroid is up to snuff, is what I'll just say.
I love that.
Um, because as our hormones move, they don't move alone. They move
Mm,
together. The thyroid can right away be influenced, and with an autoimmune disease with type 1 diabetes, our thyroid should always be on the radar. And we're at risk of low thyroid overall. So, with these symptoms of hormone imbalance, it can be thyroid, but more so, it could really just be cortisol. And
mm.
with type 1 diabetes, I know at least a few times this month or in the last month, my Dexcoms alerted me and disrupted my sleep. Disrupted sleep, running a business, having two kids, and too many sports. Cortisol's already at risk. So, with type 1 diabetes, our cortisol is impacted from moving blood sugars. So again, there's a lot on our shoulders to manage to
Yeah.
optimize hormone balance. So
Mhm.
going back to this Dutch Plus test, it looks at my hormone metabolites. It is not a blood test, it's urine and saliva, but it'll look at hormone metabolites. It'll look at my cortisol. It'll look at how I'm detoxifying my estrogen, as there's various pathways. Are we detoxifying estrogen down a cancerous pathway or more of an optimal pathway? That's important
Okay.
to know. As well, testosterone, it'll give me micronutrients, an organic acid test.
Mm.
So I did this test and I was like, my gosh, why
What'd
are
you
my
find
results
out?
be the worst?
Oh, no.
But I do remember, I'm looking at the date, it was February 2023, and I remember January and that month being one of the more stressful ones of the decade. So that very much couldn't be a part of my story. But I saw immensely that my cortisol was so bad. My stress management, my resilience was really bad. So that was probably where a lot of my symptoms were driving from. But when I looked at my metabolites, when I, dashed down, bulleted all the symptoms I was having to prepare myself for my gynecologist appointment, hormones were low as well.
Mhm.
Again, number one, it's hard. It's like a chicken and the egg when we're trying to manage blood sugar and we can't get it right. It's like the stress, then the blood sugar is bad, then the blood sugar is bad, then the stress is bad.
Right.
And I was like, I just really have noticed this troublesome with blood sugar. My gynecologist was wonderful, sat down with me, gave me time to talk through things. I showed her my Dutch Plus test. She's like, I don't know what that is. I don't care to know what that is. Let's just talk about your symptoms. And a lot of conventional doctors will say that with these more
Yeah.
functional tests. Dutch
Mhm.
tests, Dutch Plus tests are expensive. They're not the
Mhm.
first thing I provide to a client, but if it helps us get a bigger direction, that's when I utilize labs. But it was a talking point for me. It gave me insight on how to better speak with my doctor. And she said, let's start simple. We're going to put you on progesterone. We're just going to have you cycle that. And so I am not, and was not on progesterone every single day. I take progesterone right at ovulation. So I started at day 14. So I'm always tracking
Mhm.
that cycle. And
Mhm.
then I finish taking progesterone at day 27. So I
Okay.
take progesterone 14, day 14 to day 27. My cycle is usually 20 to 28 to 29 days. Right away, she gave me too much of a dose.
Mhm.
So you remember, I was like, okay, I'm going to try some progesterone. No clue what this would be like.
Yeah.
And I run my business. I also teach at a yoga studio. And I remember being at the yoga studio and I was like, I am so emotional. Like I felt like I could cry at the drop of a dime. And lo and behold, I needed to be on half the dose I started on.
Okay.
So just like gut health with hormone health, it's very unique to each person's
Mhm.
needs. Because
Mhm.
I started progesterone at age 39 does not mean our listeners need to start that soon,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
need it at all. So again, everyone's very unique. That's where my journey started. And from then, it's graduated to now I'm on estrogen. I actually tried to go off estrogen. I went off for about 6 months. It was horrible.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm back on it and it's working really well. I do feel like my blood sugars are far more manageable. Again, that's my number one complaint. That's the number one
Yeah.
complaint. Also, why I layered on estrogen.
Mhm.
And something I didn't realize, but every time I put on an estrogen and I'm using an external estrogen, I prefer if someone's like, Kelly, what's your advice? Again, I'm a dietitian, I am not a doctor. But what is your observations of use of estrogen? It should always be paired with progesterone, but
Mhm.
I like when it's either a cream or a patch. I like
Mhm.
cream better, but that takes more attention and consistency and remembering to dose it and
Mhm.
put the cream on correctly versus a
Mhm.
patch, you slap it on for three and a
Right.
half days,
Right.
usually for the most part. 2 patches a week, for a certain set of days. So I've
Love it.
unloaded a lot. What questions?
That's really good. That's really good. And you know, everything that you this is the funny part because I wished I was as in tune as you are
Mm,
now because my story was a hot mess, literally, because I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't looking close. I didn't have the sister that happened to, and you know, it doesn't have to be a sister, but it can be a
yeah,
friend. It can be somebody else that is going through it that brings the topic up. Of course, my doctors didn't bring it up either. So it was never a correlation with all these other symptoms that I'm going to mention, why they reared their ugly head and how I didn't realize it was now, you know, because it's, you know, when we can reflect back and it's like, ah, now I get it.
yeah,
Now I get it. That's, you know, and that's why we're here. That's why this show is here. That's why we're going to write a book. That's why, because I want you women to not suffer or to stumble through for over 10 years like I did.
yeah.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that you are ahead of the game.
I
And I
don't
love that. I love that dynamic, you know,
mm,
and the difference between your journey and my journey, and along the way, we're both learning so much, and I think
yeah.
that's what the community can most definitely get from us. Okay, so you wanna know where mine started? Hmm,
Can I not intervene,
absolutely.
but there's a few things I think I wanna make sure I tie to my story as well.
Yeah.
I feel like, I love the opportunity to be very functional and holistic and organic in life and so forth. And I was hesitant to want to use hormones. I was like,
Mhm,
why would we cheat Mother Nature? So I had a graduation of wanting and desiring these hormones. Um, and part of it is, the average age was age 48.
mhm,
So we're living longer, so we need hormones to help us do that. I also had a practitioner who was working with one of my clients, and she was using hormones pretty young, and we had a joint call, and that practitioner was like, women are not meant to be sitting ducks. And like I remember her
yeah.
saying those words, and I was like,
Mhm,
aha, aha, like a little bit of aha. And then last but not least, unrelated to my story, a study came out this month, and it was
mhm.
from Finland, and it found that women who optimize their health age 36 to 46 can prove health for the decades to come. And I think women's health is part of this story. So
Yeah,
let's throw
like
that in
that.
there before we
Yes, and that doesn't surprise me, absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, it's being aware of what's to come.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think how
yeah.
we behave in the decade before influences our hormones the next decade to come.
So
And I've
true.
always said that, and the study
Yeah,
kind of
kinda
emphasized that.
confirms that. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm gonna say around age 40-ish, maybe a little bit younger, maybe in my late 30s. I was having very heavy cycles to the point where I couldn't even go to work. I can remember I was working corporate job back in those days, And I had an amazing manager, and I would just have to call her, usually the night before, and it's like, "I can't make it to work tomorrow." And this went on for a couple I'm gonna say it went on too long. It was one of those things that kinda got obviously, we have months that are not quite as bad and we can kind of function. And then there were months like that where I was literally incapacitated for a day or 2. I've got horror stories, and I know women out there can relate to this sort of scenario that hopefully it's never happened to you. So I went to my OBGYN at that time, and birth control
I was just gonna
was an
say, let me
option.
guess, she said you should
Let
go
me
on birth
just
control.
put on the pill, which, in theory, in birth control, it works to manipulate our cycle. So and that's the purpose of it. I was never on birth control in my earlier years. I tried it when I was in my early 20s, newly married, not ready to have a family. I just had a lot of bad side effects. Again, it's so interesting when you think back to where you were, what you thought you knew, because I knew nothing about any of the things we're talking about 20, 25 years ago. I was always health conscious, but I did not have my head in the books and all the learning, that you and I do now. So I'm thankful for that. And we can't go back and, write the history books.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to reflect. And I think that's really what motivates me more is to talk more about this because I don't want other women to have to stumble. So again, I went to the OBGY, birth control. Pretty much, I think that was her only Advil. I guess it was Advil, ibuprofen. Well, you can take ibuprofen, a couple days before your cycle, during your cycle, you can take up to, standard says, you can take up to 6 to 8 a day. And I was like, whoa, that's a lot to put in my system. And to be honest, that's where I started because I wasn't willing to get on the pill. And I went ahead and I said, okay, I'll try this ibuprofen. I think I did that for a few months. It eased it, but it never really, kind of changed anything. So my other option was to get a ablation done. So the endometrial ablation. And I will say that was life changing. I did get that done. It immediately, and that can go either way for some women. It's not an absolute. It did work for me. And I was in my early 40s. And yeah, that was just kind of the way it kind of rolled out for me. But again, in hindsight, when I think about that, that was definitely a hormonal imbalance that I was going through. And from what I understand, and maybe you can confirm this, Kelly, from what we're both kind of learning in the space from functional hormone experts, like what you said, the first thing you went on was progesterone. That is what I needed. And yeah,
That's right.
something as simple as you know, as simple as that could have really, really stopped what was going on in my uterus, with that production of the lining of the uterus, which is what's happening. So, and I think the common term now that we hear kind of tossed around is estrogen dominance. And it's not that our estrogen is super high, it's that our progesterone is super low. And
Yeah.
the two are not where they need to be happy and in balance. And with that comes symptoms. And in my case, that's the symptom. And I know I'm not alone in this. This is definitely not a common thing, but it's not unusual for this to happen as we're getting older. And I don't know if type 1 diabetes played into that equation. I don't know. I guess we'll never know. But that was my story early on and not knowing.